People have always described Bobby Fischer's style as a chess player as universal. That is, he could play any type of position. We know players like Capablanca were brilliant in the endgame, Tal, brilliant at tactics. Fischer could play any type of position, and this game is a good example of that, where he really has the screws put to him by his opponent, and he has to play really a brilliant game. This was played in 1957 at the U.S. Chess Championships. His opponent is Sidney Norman Bernstein, who was a fixture in the New York chess scene, a chess master who played in, I believe, 8 United States Chess Championships, and he has the white pieces in this game. Fischer has the black pieces. Let us jump right in. E4, C5, knight F3, D6. We have an open Sicilian on the board. Knight to F6 hits the E4 pawn. Knight to C3 defends it. And A6. The Najdorf Sicilian. Black gains control over the B5 square, and he might play B5 himself. And white plays bishop to G5, the sharpest line against the Najdorf, the critical main line, threatening to damage black's pawn structure. So Fischer plays E6, so that if he takes the knight, he could retake with the queen. F4, and here Fischer plays bishop to E7. He would later come to be known for playing queen to B6 or the poison pawn variation, but here he plays the absolute main line of bishop to E7. Queen to F3. This is played against the move B5. If black plays B5, white would play E5. The queen would hit the rook. The pawn would hit the knight. So Fischer plays knight B to D7. Long castling from white. And queen to C7. And this restores the idea of B5, because after B5, if white were to play E5, Fischer could play bishop to B7, hitting the queen. And the queen at C7 would defend that bishop. Also, the queen is just well placed on the C7 square anyway. G4, expanding, gaining space on the king side. B5. And now the main line here is to take the knight. Idea is to take the knight and then hit the knight with G5 after it recaptures. But Bernstein plays the less common bishop to G2, seemingly overprotecting his vulnerable E4 point. Bishop to B7 from Fischer. Rook H to E1. So you look at the arrangement of white's pieces. He's fully developed, and it looks like he has a lot of attacking potential here, but he does have this sensitive E4 pawn, and Fischer plays B4, hitting the knight that defends the pawn. And to be honest, black is probably already slightly better here, but Bernstein makes an interesting decision, an aggressive decision. He plays the piece sacrifice, knight to D5. And this is a common sacrificial idea in these lines against the Najdorf, and very dangerous for the player of the black pieces. Even if the sacrifice isn't 100% sound, black has to navigate very carefully to survive the initiative white has here, and this game is no exception. Fischer does go ahead and take that knight off of the board, ED5, ED5, and we already can see the threats white is developing. The bishop is pinned to the king. If black were to castle, the rook would just take the bishop, and white would just have a clear advantage. So Fischer plays king to F8. He gives up the right to castle, but he leaves his king in contact with the bishop, so the rook can't take it, and he steps out of the pin. Now knight to F5, another threat from white. Sort of the reward for giving up that piece is that he gets a long series of threatening moves. So now the knight is threatening to take the bishop at E7, along with that rook. Fischer adds a second defender, the rook to E8, and now queen to E3, a third attacker. But Fischer is able to play bishop to D8 because the knight at F6 defends the rook. Queen takes rook, the knight would just retake. And so the queen has to move. Queen goes to D4 in a strong centralized position. And this next move from Bobby Fischer, very strong. He plays the move bishop to C8. It's very hard to play retreating moves in chess, but what he's doing is he wants to play knight to C5 and then use this bishop to take off this very threatening knight at F5. So if he can get that knight off of the board, a lot of white's threats are going to dissipate. White plays bishop to H4, clearing the way for the move G5. Knight to C5. And in this position, Fischer's done a very good job of defending. White's already given up a piece, so he has to keep the initiative going. If he loses the initiative, he's going to lose the game. So here he plays a very interesting sacrificial idea, giving up a second piece. Knight takes g7. Why not? You got to give it up. So here we see Fischer in this game with an opponent who's sacrificing everything, and Fischer has to play a long series of very accurate defensive moves. And this does look scary for black, and a lot of people would not be able to withstand this kind of pressure. Fischer goes ahead and takes that second piece, but after g5, we see white is going to be regaining that piece and opening up black's king even further. Bishop to f5 from Fischer, very dangerous. Fischer is actually threatening in this position to play knight to b3 check, which forks the king and the queen, and if the knight is taken, queen takes c2 checkmate. So Fischer has little threats of his own that have to be worried about. Bernstein takes on f6, and that's with check, so the knight to b3 move can't be played right here. And Fischer plays king to h6. He feels it's safer here than it would be on one of these squares. Also, he's keeping, of course, these rooks connected. That's most important. Now, the threat of knight to b3 check is still on the board. So Bernstein plays queen to c4 to eliminate that threat for the time being. But now Fischer plays knight to d7, offering the exchange of queens. And there's really no easy way for white to turn that down, because the queen can't move away completely because of this threat of mate on c2. The only move he could play to avoid the exchange of queens would be queen to b3. But after bishop takes f6, it looks like Fischer would just be doing fine. And so he goes ahead and exchanges queens, but that is not the end of the threats or the mating attack at all, even though queens are off the board. Bishop takes c3, bishop to f3, and now white's looking to use his two bishops and rooks to get at this king that is on h6. The bishop goes to d8 to hit the f6 pawn. Bishop to g5 check, pushing the king to the g file. And it has nowhere to go. This is the only square it's not in check. And now rook to g1. Bernstein sets up discoveries against Fischer's king on g6. And this, again, looks very dangerous. But Fischer calmly and with composure just goes ahead and takes that bishop on f6, the pawn at f6 with his bishop. He's calculated the possibilities, and he realizes he's fine after this. Well, sort of. He's not going to get mated. And if bishop takes f6, king takes f6, in this position, he's doing fine. So Bernstein, to sort of throw more wood onto the fire, plays bishop to h4, which is a discovered check from the rook. So his bishop isn't hanging. Fischer has to deal with this check. So he goes back to h6. Now the bishops are exchanged, and Bernstein at least has kept this king trapped on the file on this h6 square. And now rook to g5, bringing in the rooks, gaining a tempo against the bishop at f5, bishop to e4, and rook to f1. Now at this point, the most natural move on the board has got to be bishop takes f3. But that would have been a colossal mistake, because even with this reduced material, after bishop f3, rook takes f3, black is lost. There's the threat of mate on h3. He can only delay it by blocking with his knight one time. And the only way to get out of mate is to play rook to e1 check. And then after knight to e4 check, king takes rook, knight takes rook. So he has to give the piece back. And this endgame is much better for white, probably just winning. It's possible Fischer could have found a miracle draw here, but highly unlikely. So it's essential that he does not take on f3 here. So what Fischer does is he plays the bishop back to g6. Rook f to g1, continuing to build up. Rook to e3, hits that bishop. The bishop goes back to d1. Now knight to e4, hits the rook. Rook 5 to g2, and now f5. And a strong knight now appears on the e4 square, and it looks like the initiative has been extinguished. Bishop to e2 hits that pawn at a6. Pawn advances. Last effort by white to play h5, hopefully generate some play that way. But just rook to h3. Blocks that h file, controls that pawn. The pawn advances, but it comes off of the board. And a few more moves here, hoping to take the knight and advance this pawn, but it really adds up to not. Just play a few more moves. And king to g7, rook f3. And this rook f3 move was the sealed move. It was an adjourned game, but they did not restart the game. Bernstein resigned before they came back to the board. But it is interesting to see, because you don't see that very often, a game where Fischer is just under constant attack, where his opponent is sacrificing like crazy. But even in that style of play, Fischer maintained a very high level of excellence. Hope you have enjoyed this game. See you again soon at Chess Dog. Goodbye.